I unleashed my terrifying childhood trauma. And it awoke something dark in my home. I never should have opened that door. The moment my hand touched the cold knob, a wave of dread crashed over me. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss. My heart raced. My breath caught in my throat. As I went about my routine, the familiar surroundings of my childhood home enveloped me. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the familiar, worn-out countertops. It felt safe, or so I thought. The old wallpaper was peeling, the floors creaked beneath my feet, and shadows danced in the corners of my vision. Just ordinary sounds, right? But a chill slithered down my spine, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. Then came the noises. At first, it was just a rustle, like the wind playing tricks on me. I ignored it, anxious thoughts swirling like a storm. It's just my imagination, I told myself. But the air grew thick, each breath heavy with unease. A sudden crash shattered the silence. My heart leaped. I spun around. Nothing. Just shadows creeping along the walls. Shadows that felt alive. That I took a step back, my hands trembling, skin prickling as if the house itself were watching me. Then the whispers began. Faint at first, like echoes of distant conversations, but unmistakably there. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was chilling, soaked in sorrow. They wrapped around me, a cold embrace laced with dread. As I crept deeper into the house, an unseen force urged me forward. The door loomed ahead, the same door I had promised never to open. Curiosity clawed at me. I needed to know. I reached for the doorknob. The air turned icy, heavy with dread. I hesitated, my fingers hovering above the metal. Suddenly, the door creaked open on its own, a yawn of aged wood. My heart thundered. I couldn't move. I could only stare into the inky darkness beyond. Shadows whispered secrets, inviting me into something unholy. My breath quickened, and panic swelled inside my chest. I had unleashed something horrific. The figure emerged slowly, just out of reach of the dim light, tall and hunched. It loomed, features hidden in the gloom. A scream clawed at my throat, but it wouldn't come. All I felt was ice flooding my veins. I backed away, heart racing, hands shaking violently. The world around me began to fade, swallowed by the darkness. Then, just like that, the door slammed shut behind me. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I stood frozen, heart pounding, staring at the closed door. My mind raced, replaying the moment I had just experienced. Whatever that figure was, its presence still loomed over me, a weight pressing down on my chest that made it hard to breathe. The house felt alive, its very walls pulsing with an unseen energy. The shadows, those insidious beings, twisted and contorted like black smoke, slithering along the floor. I blinked, and they seemed to ripple, as though mocking my fear. I stumbled backward, the fluorescent kitchen light flickering absurdly, casting grotesque shapes that danced around me. Then came the whispers again, swirling in a cacophony of despair and anger, their words sharper and clearer. Leave, you don't belong, it's not safe. Panic flooded through me. They clawed at my sanity, relentless reminders of the darkness festering within the confines of this house. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the voices seeped through my fingers, louder and more insistent. That I turned and ran, sprinting through the labyrinth of rooms, desperately dodging the oppressive shadows that flickered just at the edge of my vision. Every creak of the floorboards cried out, an eerie chorus, as if the house were alive and hungry for my fear. The walls seemed to stretch, confining me, the hallways twisting like a serpent that wanted to constrict, that I burst into my childhood bedroom, the room where I had felt so safe, where laughter had once echoed freely. But now it was suffocating. The air was thick, suffused with an overwhelming sense of dread. The bed sat unmoving, the covers undisturbed, as if waiting for me to crawl back under them, back to a time when everything felt normal, but normal was a lie. That as I tore my gaze away from the comforter, I caught sight of an old, dusty mirror hanging askew on the wall. My reflection stared back, but it was wrong. My eyes, wild with terror, were not the only eyes in the glass. Behind me, in the depths of the mirror, a writhing shadow flickered, its edges sharp and inhuman. It grinned, showing teeth that were too many, too jagged. Bile rose in my throat as I stumbled back, crashing into the dresser. The wood splintered beneath my weight, shattering the fragile image of home. The whispering grew louder, a torrential wave washing over me. It's inside you, it's always been inside you. Hot tears streamed down my cheeks as the truth clawed its way to the surface. I had brought this upon myself. Every elusive nightmare, every fleeting horror from my childhood, was resurfacing, flooding this place with something unfathomable. I was the conduit, and somehow, I had woken it. A sudden pounding drowned out the voices. The door, the one that had opened to that figure moments ago, vibrated violently as if something powerful was trying to escape. I glanced back, dread pooling in my stomach, and for a flicker of a moment, the heavy wooden door splintered at the edges, dark tendrils reaching out like the fingers of a dying creature. I turned to flee, but the house thrummed with a low hum, a heartbeat urging me to stay. My pulse quickened, I knew I needed to leave, but the door to the hallway was gliding shut. The click echoed like a gunshot, sealing me in, locking me with the source of my childhood fears. That's when I heard the laughter. High-pitched, cunning, resonating from the very air I breathed. It was familiar laughter, the haunting echoes of laughter I had thought I had left behind. My heart dropped as I recognized it after all these years. Join us. And then the lights went out, plunging me into darkness. I was engulfed, consumed by the very horror I had tried to escape, and within the pitch, the laughter rose, wrapping around me like a shroud. Join us. Sucking in every ounce of courage, I reached for the door, but it wasn't there. Instead, cold hands gripped my shoulders from behind, spinning me into the void. My scream pierced through the suffocating darkness but was swallowed instantly, leaving me breathless and alone with the shadows. Then, the guttural voice, a whisper more like a growl, echoed in my ear. You wanted to. No. Now you will never know peace again. The room began to shift, contorting inwards, and as I struggled against the current of fear pulling me deeper, a brilliant flash momentarily lit the room. The shadows recoiled, a figure stepped into my line of vision, revealing a monstrous visage I had not wanted to see. The figure spoke, voice dripping with malice. You've released us and now we have business to attend to. That's when I realized it wasn't finished with me yet. The darkness felt palpable, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. The figure loomed, a grotesque amalgamation of familiar faces twisted into a shocking parody of their former selves. My mother's eyes glinted with an otherworldly hunger, and my father's mouth gaped open in a soundless scream. They were there, yet not there, echoes from my past forged into shoes of torment. Do you remember us? Their voices intertwined, melodic yet laced with venom. You called us back when you dared to remember. My body froze again, trembling against an impulse to cry out. I wanted to run, to escape the prison of their memory, but I was rooted to the floor by an unseen force, compelled to confront this terror. They advanced, distorted smiles stretching wide, a cruel mockery of affection. The games have only just begun, the amalgamation whispered, their voices a symphony of desolation. The edges of the room started to warp, bending and stretching in ways that defied logic, pulling inward, urging my spirit to give in, to succumb to the horrors I had buried so deep. What do you want? I demanded, my voice quaking despite my efforts to sound strong. What is this? The words tasted like ash on my tongue. Release. Rebirth. Return to the cherished memories, sweet child, they crooned, the room pulsating in rhythm with their words. We've been waiting for your fear to bring us back, for your pain to chain you here. That I could feel cold sweat trickling down my back as shadows stretched and wove around them like serpents, puppeteering their movements. Clenching my fists, I focused on the remnants of courage in my heart. I was not theirs to claim. I could not let them win. With sheer determination, I forced myself to remember what lay beyond this room, beyond this wretched house, where love and warmth had once existed. In vivid flashes, I saw sunlit summers, laughter mingling with the scent of fresh grass. I thought of my friends, the moments when joy had outshone every crevice of doubt. But each memory was met with violent echoes from this spectral gathering. "You think it's so simple," they taunted, their voices thickening with an oppressive weight. "Your memories are shackled to us. You cannot escape what you have wrought." The room spun as another wave of menacing laughter crashed over me, drowning out the sweetness of the past, leaving only despair. An aching void filled my chest, and I felt the temperature plummet. I glanced back at the mirror, now reflecting the horror unfolding in front of me, showing an endless cascade of shadowy figures imprisoned within it. "Join us," they urged, their voices now seeping into my mind, each syllable sending jolts of panic through my veins. "Join us, and we can be whole again." The oppressive darkness around me pulsed with energy, and I could almost grasp its intent, a desperate hunger to consume not just my soul, but the remnants of my childhood's innocence. Suddenly, there came a violent shatter, the mirror cracked, and shards fell to the ground like rain, echoing in the vastness of the void. I caught a glimpse of something terrifying behind the surface, eyes blaring like burning coals, a vortex teeming with horrendous laughter that I staggered backward, colliding against the wall, and in that instant, the shadows lunged, an amorphous mass writhing toward me like a beast unleashed. The room roared with an infernal cacophony, drowning out my thoughts. Time stretched and twisted as they converged, reaching for me with fingers made of darkness, 1,000 whispers erupting into a single terrifying cry: "You belong to us." Forever. Just as the cold encircled my throat, a light sparked within the darkness, a blinding white beam emerging from the corner of the room, illuminating half-formed faces, their expressions awash with anger and desperation. They reached for me, grabbing my limbs as if to pull me closer to them and away from the shadowy horror. "Stop. You don't know what you're doing," I shrieked, clawing against their grip. But their jaws snapped, and I felt my feet leave the ground as they yanked me toward the mirror's jagged edges. The darkness hissed, an undeniable chill gripping my heart as the laughter built to a bone-chilling apex. "You will know," they shrieked as the world around me began to dissolve, splintering like the glass they had shattered. That I was weightless, balance slipping away as I fell toward that gaping maw, and for a breathless moment, all was lost. Then the searing light from the mirror enveloped me, pulling me closer toward the unknown horrors that awaited beyond. I was caught between the agonizing screams of my land of shadows and the desperate pleas of the light, and as nausea twisted my stomach, I was thrust into the terrifying uncertainty of either fate. That I and that breath before immersion, I glimpsed a face resembling my own within the swirling vortex of shadows, the face of a child I once was, smiling back at me in a silence that screamed warnings of an explosion just on the horizon. And then, the void sucked me in, extinguishing everything I believed I understood, leaving only the echoes of a sinister laughter trailing off, melding into the growing shadows surging around me, leaving me breathless and spiraling deeper into the lurking abyss. That I was not alone. But even in the darkness, something else stirred, and it was far worse than the monsters of my childhood. The darkness enveloped me as I plummeted, caught in a relentless whirl of spectral whispers and anguished cries. I felt the air grow heavier, pressing against my skin like 1,000 icy hands, dragging me deeper into the chaos. The more I struggled, the tighter the shadows clung, wrapping around me like an undesired embrace. Suddenly, I was thrown into a clearing, a warped semblance of the backyard from my childhood home. The sky above was painted a ghastly gray, the sun reduced to a dull disk, struggling to cut through the gloom. Trees that had once been joyous sentinels now stood like mournful giants, gnarled branches shivering as if in agony. That I in the center of this nightmarish tableau lay, a twisted swing set, rusting chains swaying gently in a non-existent breeze. I stumbled toward it, the unease in my gut intensifying as memories flooded in: laughter, companionship, innocence lost. As I approached, the swings began to rock violently, as though propelled by unseen forces. A chill ran down my spine, and I forced myself to look away before the darker memories could ignite, but there was no escaping the shadows. They stirred restlessly at the edges of the clearing, creeping closer as if awaiting an invitation. Then I heard the childish laughter of my long-lost friends echoing through the trees, a playful melody that turned sinister in an instant. I dropped to my knees, my heart racing as the laughter sharpened, morphing into piercing screams, "Help us! You left us!" Voices wailed, twisting the air around me, reeking of betrayal and accusation. Faces sometimes familiar emerged from the shadows, distorted by pain, their eyes wide with desperation and anger. That I scrambled to my feet, terror twisting in my chest. "No! I didn't mean to leave you behind!" I shouted, but the shadows coiled around my ankles, dragging me down into their cold embrace. "You need to leave me alone," they tightened their grip, pulling me toward the rusted swing set, and I felt the overwhelming urge to remember the games we had played. As memories clawed at the edges of my mind, something deep within whispered that I had the power to fight back. "Please. Just let me go." I cried, but my voice was drowned out, swallowed by a cacophony of released sorrow that erupted like a vengeful storm. The grass beneath my feet wilted, dark tendrils creeping up, threatening to ensnare my very soul. Then, out of the roiling darkness, something large stirred, a shadow that moved with a sentience that sent tremors of dread spiraling through me. It slithered forward, a grotesque shape reminiscent of something alive yet so utterly wrong, flickering in and out of perception like a dying ember. The air tasted like ash, remember, it hissed, its voice a rasping whisper that held terror within each word. "You summoned us. You wanted to play for all eternity that I didn't want. I don't want this." I screamed, my pleas futile as I was yanked toward the swing set, its chains clinking mockingly in response. Terror surged. This was not just a memory, it was a trap, a twisted game leading me back to where it all began. Pulling with every ounce of strength, I broke free of the grasping shadows just long enough to catch a glimpse of something bulky and vaguely humanoid, lurking between the trees, watching, waiting. Then, from the shadows behind the swings, a figure stepped into the monstrous light. It looked like a child self standing there, arms crossed, expression morphed into a cruel smirk, a spectral echo of my innocence twisted into a taunt. "Do you see? You can't escape me," it said, and my heart plummeted. "You brought this on yourself, and now you must play." Before I could react, the world around me erupted in colorless chaos, and the shadows recoiled, morphing into a vortex that whipped violently about me. From their depths, shapes began to form. A gigantic hand, grotesque in proportion and covered in patches of weeping willow bark, reached for me. "Playtime is eternal." It thundered as darkness rushed toward me like the tide, swallowing my cries as I was pulled under. In the blink of an eye, I was standing again, not in the clearing, but in a dimly lit room that felt eerily familiar. My bedroom, once a sanctuary, now dripping with malevolence. The shadows pulsated along the walls, seemingly absorbed with my presence, and slowly, creeping figures began to materialize from the darkness, their distorted faces pressing eagerly against the edges of the room. Then there was silence, pregnant with expectation. I could feel a new weight to the air, a grotesque longing fringed with a familiar sense of dread that thrummed deep within my bones. As I looked to the center of the room, where the shadows converged, the unsettling likeness of my childhood self stepped forward, Awoke, a sinister puppet of my past, reaching a hand toward me in invitation. "Come play with us forever and ever." At that moment, the door slammed shut behind me, the echo reverberating as it sealed my fate, the last shred of hope vaporizing in a cloud of darkness. As screams erupted once more, this time echoed by my own voice, I realized the truth. The thing I had unleashed was only the beginning, and it hungered for more than just my fear. It desired my very essence. I stood paralyzed, engulfed by shadows threatening to consume me whole. Then, with excruciating slowness, I turned to face my own reflection in the mirror that had appeared on the wall, the edges glowing with an unnatural flames, revealing dark contours of what enthralled within me. And in that moment, I understood. Because staring back was not a mere reflection. It was the grotesque amalgamation of all my fears, and it wore my face. And the darkness whispered, "Now you will truly know what it means to play." The room began to shift, growing tighter as the shadows pressed in. With each heartbeat, the very walls seemed to pulse, alive and hungry. Frantic, I turned away from the mirror, my breath quickening as the reflections writhed like live serpents, feasting on my dread. "Why won't you let me go?" I sobbed, but the shadows answered only with a chorus of laughter, a mocking echo that danced around me. In the corner of the room, a toy chest I had long forgotten loomed, covered in cobwebs that glistened in the dim light. It breathed a slow, rhythmic rise and fall that echoed the sound of my own panicking heart. "Mama always said there were rules," a soft voice cooed from the chest, sugary sweet yet laced with a thread of ice. "You forgot the rules, didn't you? Let me return." I didn't mean it. I was just a child. I screamed, terror rising in my throat as the toy chest creaked open, revealing a darkness deeper than the rest of the room. From within, cold drafts escaped like a whisper pulled by an unseen force that made my skin crawl. The voice continued, "You need to remember to play properly." I felt the shadows inch closer, weaving through the room like sinister dancers, enhancing the atmosphere thick with omnipresent dread. Goosebumps raised on my arms, and I could hardly stand still as the air turned electric, humming with malevolence. Then a hand small, delicate, yet horrifyingly familiar reached out from the chest. My pulse raced as I recognized it. It was a child's hand, my own from years ago. The fingers curled around the edge of the chest, pulling slowly into view. A laughter erupted, joyful and cruel, as the pressure mounted. "What more do you want from me?" I choked out, feeling the walls push in further. "More games, more friends." It chimed before tumbling headlong from the chest, landing with a soft thump. The toy then materialized as something grotesque, a patchwork of dolls with their features crudely stitched together, eyes made of blackened buttons gleaming with life. They stood swaying, their movements unnaturally fluid, the sound of creaking joints filling the thick air. They began to chant, words I could never unhear, conjuring the twisted innocence of playground rhymes, yet each syllable was drenched in a monstrous glee. "Round and round, well, never stop. Join us now, or you'll drop." I stumbled backward, bumping into the wall. It felt immovable, a flat black surface that emanated the depths of despair. I could feel their joy radiating, an infectious darkness that sparked in my veins, urging me to succumb. "No. I want play." I screamed, my fists clenched tight as despair threatened to take hold. But the chanting only grew louder. Every sound resonated through my bones, drowning out reason and thought. In a frenzy, I tore my gaze away from the horrific tableau and spotted a small window, anchored in the far corner of my room. It glowed faintly, a gleam of hope struggling against the encroaching black. Racing toward it, I could hear the laughter turning sharp, echoing with the voices of those I had once called friends, the phantoms of the past that had lain dormant within my mind, now crawling back to life with an insatiable hunger. "Too late. Come play." They chanted in unison, shaking the very foundation of my soul. That I launched myself at the window, fingers clawing against the wooden frame, desperate to break free. It wouldn't budge, solid as the nightmare wrapping around me. As I turned back, the dolls had multiplied, their stitched smiles menacing, claws outstretched and eager. They hovered closer, circling me like vultures. The chains of the swing set I had fled earlier clinked ominously from some unseen place, a haunting melody beckoning me to join their eternal play. Suddenly, I saw a face among the dolls, one I recognized from my childhood, a childhood friend, forever lost, eyes empty yet pleading beneath layers of malice. "Join us, it's better to play than to be lost." My heart raced, panic overtaking the last remnants of my resolve. I was backed against the wall, shadows swirling around me in an amorphous frenzy. A kaleidoscope of rage and sorrow enveloped me, threatening to crush my spirit under its weight. Just as I braced for the imminent assault of the shadows, I felt the window behind me yield slightly, a hint of cool air brushing against my back, a breath of freedom. But as I turned to push through, the dolls lunged, their faces contorting into screams of rage, infectiously joyful and despairing. One hand snaked around my wrist, icy and penetrating like a venomous bite. In that fleeting moment, a horrible realization washed over me: I could escape, but not without leaving a piece of myself behind. The very essence of what I had long buried would be claimed, and just as I wrestled with the dread of my choice, the shadows surged forward, spilling over Methik and choking, forming a whirlwind of indistinct facetious cacophony of lost laughter reaching its most fevered pitch. "Let's play forever," they crooned, as the depths dragged me into a realm where shadows danced out of time and memory. Then, as everything blurred and shrank, I was sucked into the swirling darkness, and a single laugh remained, a laugh that sounded eerily like my own, that I collided into the true depths of the void, only to hear the near silence shatter as the laughter morphed into a piercing scream, one that would haunt me for eternity as I vanished deeper into the abyss, caught between my choices. The silence was stifling, an impenetrable fog that enveloped me as I drifted further into the void. It pressed heavily against my chest, a weight that suffocated and exhilarated all at once. The laughter faded into an echo, twining around my thoughts like a vine, squeezing tightly until the remnants of my sanity fluttered like leaves in a storm. This darkness, however, was not empty. A pulse throbbed in the depths, rhythmic and insistent, filling the stillness with an undercurrent of dread that hinted at things waiting. Curling in the shadows that I regained my senses, disoriented, and finally opened my eyes to find myself in an eerily familiar place. It was the basement of my childhood home, where the air was thick with mildew and the faint scent of regret hung like the low haze of mothballs. The flickering light bulb above cast sinister shadows that flickered along the concrete walls, contorting into grotesque shapes that slithered in my peripheral vision. In the corner sat the same old toy chest, the one that had beckoned me with sinister glee. Its surface was now pulsing with a soft, eerie luminescentia, beckoning glow that twisted the landscape of my mind into a whirlwind of memories. Choking on desperation, I approached with caution, each step echoing like the drums of war in the silence. "Playtime." A childish voice piped, echoing from within the chest, the timbre warped, suggestively teasing. It almost sounded like my own voice at that age before everything had shattered into shards of twisted recollection. This unreal sense of wrongness curled around me, constricting any remnant of rational thought. "You can't have me. You've taken enough," I shouted, my voice reverberating in the stillness. The chest creaked as if considering my words. "But we all want to play, don't we?" It chimed sweetly, the tone a shiver up my spine. Then, with a sudden violence, the lid flung open, revealing a void that seemed to reach out to me, dark and consuming. The shadows within twisted and twirled, forming the faces of those I thought I'd forgotten. Friends turned into maleficent specters, each bearing the burden of the games they'd played with me, reliving that fateful day over and over. "Remember us?" they sang, their voices buoyant yet hollow, like laughter coated in frost. "We're here to play forever. Isn't it fun?" The memories collided with me, a chaotic burst of laughter, joy, and terror that flooded my senses. I staggered back, but the shadows, eager and ravenous, reached through the portal of the chest, tugging at my limbs as if they had begun to fuse with the wall behind me. "No. Not again. I can't go back," I screamed, but the shadows twisted together, forming a swirling mass that bore the outlines of all the fears I'd ever known. The darkness began to weave itself around my torso, tightening and pulling until I tasted iron on my tongue. With every heartbeat, I felt the lives and laughter of those lost friends wrapping around me like vines, constricting, suffocating. "Remember how much you loved it," they whispered, the voices rising in an unsettling horde, the air thickening with regret and longing. "Join us, dear friend. It's safe here. Safe forever." I struggled, fighting against the pressure, but my will was being drained, teased out of existence by memories I had locked so tightly away. The wooden chest pulsed like a heart, promising safety yet hiding a malice deeper than any nightmare. The walls of the basement began to close in, each inch a reminder of their betrayal, their laughter now a cacophony laced with hooks of pain. And then, I thought I saw something beyond the shadows, a glimmer of light, a mere spark in the oppressive void. Hope gripped me tightly as I turned away from the chest, my instincts screaming to run. I pushed through the shadows, pouring out like ink, rushing towards the speck of brightness that flickered, promising a way out from this hell. But then, just as hope surged within me, the toys abandoned their play, their stitched faces shifting into expressions of twisted malice, mouths stretching wider than their porcelain visage should. "Allow. You can't leave yet," they shrieked in twisted unison, their voices a storm of echoes. You owe us so much more. Come back and play." In that moment, the ground quaked. The whispers morphed into wails, the toys rushing forward as the chest's lid clanged down, sealing shut. Suddenly, the basement shook violently as the walls morphed into faces desperate, anguished, and twisted in an eternal scream. The shadows swelled with a ferocity that sent a pulse of horror down my spine. A hand reached out, ghostly fingers grasped at me, pulling me toward the chest, toward that profound, swirling darkness once more. No. I want, but the world spun, and every last trace of light disappeared, swallowed into the waiting depths. The last thing I heard before everything spun into oblivion was a single whisper that echoed like a silent scream, thirsting for enlightenment yet tainted with darkness, ready to play the ultimate game again. As the void embraced me, all that lingered was the unbearable certainty that not only was I trapped, but something darker than my childhood had awakened, hungry and waiting for the chance to feast upon my soul. The sensation of falling ceased abruptly, and I found myself suspended in silence, thick as fog. It felt as though every atom of air had conspired to contain my breath, and time itself hesitated, trembling at the edge of a precipice. When I regained my footing, confusion swept through my senses. I was no longer in the basement but instead in the dimly lit hallway of my childhood home, a place now twisted beyond recognition, every detail inscribed with a deep sense of foreboding. The walls dripped with darkness, shadows pooling in the corners, warping the familiar into grotesque representations of my innocence lost. The once vibrant photographs lining the walls had turned into smudged, contorted faces with hollow eyes that wept darkness. Their mouths were wide, not in smiles, but open in screams that rendered the air heavy with dread. The echoes of those tortured cries lingered, drumming against my ears, each pulse a reminder of the laughter that had once filled this space. Instinctively, I turned to run, but the floorboards creaked ominously beneath my weight as if protesting my every step. A note fluttered down from the ceiling, a chilling reminder of my own folly. The note was illegible, the words twisted, scribbled in a mad scrawl, but the enveloping dread told me that it held my name within its chaotic loops. As I hesitated, the soft, chilling laughter returned at an unsettling cadence that grazed my thoughts like ice. "Don't you want to play? You've been invited." It was a voice I recognized, yet it morphed into 1,000 whispers, all reverberating against the walls, beckoning me to join them in a game that promised reunion yet carried the vile scent of betrayal. A single door at the end of the hall stood ajar, radiating an unnaturally cold light that pulsed with energy, beckoning, promising. I found my feet moving of their own accord as memories flickered to life, games played, seats empty, laughter silenced. Each step felt like a step into an abyss, my heart racing not from fear but from the pull of something deep, sinister, and tantalizing within. Pushing the door wider, a sharp gust of icy air slammed into me. The room inside twisted, reality, floors undulating like waves, walls melting into shadows. At the center, surrounded by what appeared to be an infinite void of nothingness, was an ornate mirror, its surface swirling like a stormy sea. It was as if the mirror was alive, breathing, calling my name as if I were a moth drawn to its dark flame. "Join us," the reflections whispered, the glass rippling to reveal the faces of my childhood companions. They morphed and twisted, laughter ringing out like bells, yet every note struck with an unholy resonance, laced with malice. Their eyes, those hollow, taunting eyes, spoke of games I had long forgotten. Trembling, I stepped closer, the edges of the mirror absorbing the light like a hungry maw. It beckoned me, resonating with a familiarity that shook my very core. In a moment of reckless abandon, I reached out, fingers brushing against the cool surface. The world around me spiraled as energy surged and twisted my reality into chaos. Seconds felt like hours as the boundaries between me and the reflections blurred and melded, the past and the present colliding into an unrecognizable tapestry that I was pulled inward, and screams of agony and joy intertwined, swirling around me. I could hear their voices pleading, calling from the depths of my mind. "Come home," they cried, echoing through the darkness. "Why did you leave us? We've waited so long." Suddenly, the laughter turned dark, morphing into something sinister as the room convulsed violently. Objects floated up, a menagerie of my childhood toys flying around me like bats, circling closer, their tiny eyes gleaming with unfathomable life. The air snapped with raw energy, and darkness coalesced, forming into shapes that began to merge with the laughter of my friends, twisted, warped into mockeries of their former selves. "No! You can't take me!" I shouted, instinct driving me to retreat, yet the mirror's pull intensified, cradling my desperation. It was as if the very fabric of the universe was weaving around me, triumphing in its capture of my struggle, and just when I thought I had escaped, I stared into the depths of the mirror once more. My reflection smiled back at men at my true self, but a grotesque version, a creature wrapped in shadows, eyes burning with an inexplicable hunger. "Ready to play?" it hissed, the voices of my childhood friends melding with the echoes of my fears, rising into a crescendo that threatened to engulf me. In that harrowing moment, as the world around me began to shatter at the seams, I realized that this was just the beginning. The line between innocence and darkness had been irrevocably broken, and something was coming. The shadows stirred, something ancient stirred within the abyss, awakening from its slumber, plotting, waiting for the right moment to pounce. The final remnants of my sanity whispered a chilling truth that paralyzed me. Here would be no escape from the game that was about to unfold. With a bone-chilling resolve, the mirror began to crack with energy, pulsing violently, each fissure replicating the shadow that loomed ever closer, reaching out with skeletal hands hungry for my soul. In that terrifying instant, I could only think of one thing. What happens if I lose? And the mirror answered, twisting my reflection into something unrecognizable: our game never ends. It waits. As the very essence of my being began to unravel, the cracking sound crescendoed into a deafening roar, drowning my scream as I was pulled into the chaotic whirlpool of memories and horror, swallowed whole by its terrifying embrace. Reality splintered completely, and darkness embraced me like a long-lost friend. I was no longer in the hallway but adrift in a void where time ceased to exist. Fragmented memories surged around me, disjointed whispers drifting through the darkness, fragments of laughter mingling with cries of despair. A palpable dread tingled at the back of my mind, gnawing at me with sharp, cold teeth. Suddenly, I was yanked from the inky depths, and I found myself on the floor of the living room, surrounded by the remnants of my past. My childhood toys lay scattered about, their vibrant colors dimmed, yet it was not their appearance that caused the shivers that crawled up my spine. It was the sickly sweet scent of rot that lingered in the air. The walls were no longer painted, but plastered with old newspaper clippings soaked in water and smeared with dark streaks that could only be blood. Overhead, the ceiling fan whirled lazily, its rhythmic creaking amplifying the tension. Each time it passed directly above me, shadows slithered down the walls, writhing like fanged serpents eager to strike. I felt their hunger, their anticipation, as they circled ever closer, compelling me to stay rooted to the ground, trapped in a nightmare loop of fear. I searched for a way out, but the once familiar furniture had contorted into a grotesque assembly. Chairs hunched, their wood splintering, appeared ready to lurch forward. The old family couch sagged under the weight of memories, its upholstery rotting and falling away like decaying flesh. "Don't go," a voice rasped, familiar yet alien. It dripped with malice. I spun around, heart pounding, matching my frantic pulse against the overwhelming sense of dread that pumped through the room. There, cloaked in shadows, stood a figure I could barely recognize, me childhood friend, Alex, but twisted into an amalgamation of all my worst fears. The bright, curious eyes were now sunken into dark pits, and his lips curled into a ghastly smile revealing jagged teeth, as if he were a marionette dangling from unseen strings. "Join us," he urged, his voice drenched in syrupy sweetness that made my stomach clench. "There's so much fun to be had, so much we can play." His words slithered into my ears, igniting dormant memories buried in the wreckage of my mind. Nightmares played in a sickening carousel, childhood games gone horribly wrong. The time we played hide and seek in the woods, and Alex never came back. Or the feverish summer nights when we splashed in the old pond, its murky depths held secrets that whispered in the night. The floor beneath me began to pulse like a living entity, sending tremors through my body, shocking me back into the present where the walls closed in, imposing their dread upon me. The shadows began to coalesce, and with them, more faces emerged, other lost friends, their forms contorted, facing me with hollow eyes filled with deep, unending anguish. Each one echoed a collective cry, a dirge for all that was lost, a torment surrounding me as they beckoned from their macabre dance. "Play with us. We want to remember." Their voices layered over one another, creating a cacophony that clawed at my sanity. "Why are you doing this?" I screamed, trying to shatter the wall of madness closing around me. The sound echoed in the room, bouncing off the walls and returning as a mocking whisper. "You know why," Alex hissed, stepping forward, his hand reaching towards me, stretching, elongating. "You left us behind. You abandoned the game. But now, we can all play again." "All of us." He spoke. I felt an unseen force wrap around my limbs, pulling painfully at my joints. I could barely breathe, panic clawing at my throat. The shadows thickened, swirling around me like a cyclone, laughter morphing into howls of despair, spiraling hauntingly into the void that I am not ready to die. I screamed, tears streaming down my face as the walls closed in like a vice, suffocating my breath. "I won't play with you." "Then you choose how you leave." Alex's smile widened impossibly, dark and twisted. "You can join us in the shadows or stay here." Forever. The shadows thickened, and faces materialized within them, thousands of eyes boring into my soul. With every heartbeat, the atmosphere crackled with an energy built on desperation and fear. I struggled against the dark coils, frantic, seeking an escape, but the weight of their sorrow pressed down upon me, reeking of betrayal. As I succumbed to the darkness, I caught a glimpse of the mirror from before its stormy surface, now radiating blinding light. It pulsed wildly as if beckoning me back, offering an alternative. A final chance. Look deeper, it hummed, and the faces shimmered in and out of existence, the echoes hush, revealing something hidden beneath. A forgotten memory of laughter, of joy to reclaim everything that had slipped away. Taking a leap of faith, I reached through the shadows, clawing desperately towards the mirror. Each second felt like an eternity, but the shadows tightened, holding me back, their cold grip threatening to annihilate my last chance. Yet through the overwhelming cacophony, I thought I heard one clear voice, a soft whisper cutting through the noise, one I knew all too well. "Help us." Swallowing my fear, I pushed forward, heart racing as the shadows recoiled, revealing something sinister lying in wait just beyond my grasp, something far worse than what I had left behind. Then, just as my fingers grazed the mirror's surface, I felt the ground beneath me split. A great fissure opened wide, yawning like an abyss, threatening to swallow me whole, and in that moment of agonizing choice, with darkness swirling about, I understood, some secrets whisper louder in the silence. I screamed as the void beneath me became a chasm, an unspeakable terror pulling me downward into its depths, mingling with the agonizing laughter of friends lost, ready to play forever. They echoed, waiting. And just before I disappeared into the endless abyss, a pitiful sigh floated above the din. "We've been waiting too long." The fall felt like 1,000 years compressed into an instant, each second laden with the weight of despair and terror. The darkness consumed me, an unforgiving embrace that distorted sound and vision until they were naught but twisted reflections of a distant memory. I no longer knew who I was or where I belonged, only that I was trapped in a suffocating void of anguish, spiraling endlessly like a leaf caught in a tempest. Beneath me, a chorus of haunting laughter echoed, weaving in and out of focus. It seemed to seep into my very marrow, urging me to surrender. With each twist and turn in a nightmarish descent, I sensed shadows clawing at my skin, their icy fingers tracing patterns of fear along my back. "Play," they hissed, their voices coiling around me in a dreadful chant, "play with us forever." Suddenly, my fall ceased. I landed with a soft thud on uneven ground, and the darkness around me began to peel away, revealing a macabre landscape that pulsed with every heartbeat. The air felt thick and gummy, suffocating yet alive, filled with the stench of decay and the metallic tang of blood. I was crouched in a cavernous space sprawling with rotting roots and tangled vines that seemed almost sentient. They writhed and flickered, illuminated by an eerie glow from the walls, faces trapped within the stones, etched in gruesome expressions of horror. "Help us." The whispers morphed into frantic pleas, echoing from the stone mouths as pain and regret radiated through the space. I rose unsteadily to my feet, the trembling below me creating a sense of vertigo as the ground quaked in response. The faces pressed closer, their desperate eyes searching mine, as if hoping I might free them from their torment. My gaze darted around, seeking clarity amid the chaos, when I spotted a silhouette slinking through the darkness, a familiar face emerging from the shadows. It was Alex again, though now he seemed changed, imbued with a twisted power. "They're here because of you," his voice slithered through the air, a taunting melody wrapped in malice. "Your choices brought them back to this place, let them go." I shouted, desperation lacing every word. "They don't belong here," Alex's laughter echoed through the chamber, making my skin crawl. "Do you even understand? They can't leave. They are your past, your memories, sewn together by regrets, a punishment for the sins of forgetting." With a flick of his wrist, the shadows surged forward, coiling around my limbs. I struggled against their grip, panic surging within me as the walls echoed with the agony of countless children crying for help. Their anguished pleas, mingled with the relentless laughter, coalesced into an oppressive cacophony that threatened to shatter my sanity. "That I am not like you," I screamed, fighting against the shadows. "I won't play your sick games." The shadows tightened their hold, impossibly constraining every movement, and Alex leaned closer. "But we've waited so long. They only wish to remember the fun. Don't you want to play again?" Images from my childhood swirled in my mind: barbecue days under the sun, the sweetness of watermelon dribbling down our chins, the thrill of twilight hide-and-seek. But those memories twisted into something dark and grotesque. A game that had gone too far, the laughter turning to screams. I felt the weight of that guilt settle in my chest, suffocating me like a heavy stone. "Enough!" I roared, channeling every ounce of strength. "I won't let your darkness consume me or them." In that moment, an unexpected surge of defiance coursed through me. I concentrated, forcing through the layers of shadows, pushing back against the grotesqueness of Alex and his damned puppets. The shadows writhed, shrieking in fury, their coil fracturing for an instant, and then I saw a glimmer of light distorting through the cracks in the stone. A potential way out, a glimpse of hope. I envisioned the mirror again, radiating warmth, as if calling for me once more. "Help us," the faces implored, their voices rising to a wail, drowning my thoughts in despair, but the vision flickered, threatened by the force of Alex's laughter, beckoning me back to dark memories. "You want to escape? Embrace the shadows. Well, be whole again." With newfound determination, I lunged toward the light, the primal instinct to survive sending shockwaves through me. Each step unleashed violent tremors, resonating through the cavern. I felt the walls shudder, the stone faces contorting in rage as I pressed forward right towards the light that promised salvation, but as I reached out, the shadowed figures surged, hurling themselves between me and my path, their faces morphing into grotesque masks of desperation and anger. "No! Don't leave us!" The brightness intensified, erupting into a blinding brilliance. I hesitated, torn between the broken cries of my past and the haunting pull of the light. Just as my fingers grazed the edge of the glow, the shadows erupted into chaos, swirling faster than I could comprehend. And in the split second of disarray, a chilling realization hit me: beneath the taunts, beneath the laughter, lay something far more sinister. Something lurking in the depths, waiting to consume everything if I made the wrong choice. With a final scream of defiance, I launched myself forward, but before I could cross into the light, a bone-chilling voice echoed around me. "Welcome back to playtime. We've saved a special game just for you." The ground trembled violently as darkness surged forward on all sides, threatening to swallow me whole, and at the heart of that swirling chaos, Alex grinned, revealing a truth so horrifying that it sent icy terror racing through my veins. This was no longer just about my past. It was about awakening something far worse than any childhood fear. The game had only just begun. The pulse of darkness throbbed around me, a swirling mass of shadows that pressed in on every side. I screamed, but the echoes of my cries were swallowed by the cacophony of laughter that surrounded me, each peal mocking the reality I had fought tooth and nail to escape. I clawed at the air, trying to push through the swirling shadows, desperation resonating within each fiber of my being. "Join us!" they called, their voices intertwining, wrapping around my mind like a serpent. The faces I once knew twisted and contorted, consummate deception masquerading as enticement. I could see my friends, their eyes once sparkling with vitality now dulled and hollow, desperately reaching out, but there was no innocence in their grasp. Only the decay of souls trapped in a purgatory of their own making. As the darkness swelled, I felt the weight of their demands pressing on me. Apprehension coiled tightly in my chest, merging with the overwhelming despair of my past. And then came that familiar voice, teasing and sweet, but shrouded in malice. You chose to remember. You summoned us all back. Alex stepped forward through the frenzy, but my friend was lost within that grotesque mask, replaced by the monster he'd become, a cruel puppeteer tangled in my own suffering. You see, it's not just about the play, he crooned, every word laced with the essence of charred memories. It's about the suffering that repaints this place, of loss that sweetens our home. His words pierced me, igniting the truth I had buried under layers of denial. I had come seeking closure, longed for forgiveness for myself, but all I found was an entity fueled by the void of my childhood fears. It's time to play. He shrieked, and the shadows roared in unison. But the game is only just beginning. The ground beneath me shook, and I stumbled as figures began to emerge from the shadows. Each one a remnant of my shattered past, friends lost when laughter shifted into madness. Their faces, once familiar, grotesquely warped into frenzied manifestations of pain. Help us. Help us. You left us. They echoed, their voices a singular entity of despair, pulling at my resolve. No. I screamed, stepping back, suddenly aware of the fresh realization clawing its way to the fore of my mind. I was not only the target, but the architect. This monstrosity, the shadowy tapestry of my past, was my doing. In my search for truth, I had not only awakened the dead but had opened a door that should have remained sealed. The mirror, its glow etched into my memory, retreated into the recesses of the nightmare before me, its surface marred by the grappling shadows. An icy hand gripped my wrist, dragging me back toward the entertainment they promised. Reality warped as their laughter intensified, smothering the air in an oppressive cocoon. You can't escape, Alex hissed, stepping closer, his eyes glinting with a voracious hunger. We're all trapped here together. This is your fate. You've opened the door, and now you must join us. Forever. What is one more terrified soul? A wave of confusion washed over me as recognition dawned anew. My pulse quickened. What if I refuse? My voice trembled, yet within that hesitation lay an unexpected daring, a lingering shred of defiance. The shadows halted, their laughter tapering into a chilling silence. Alex's smile widened, becoming a menacing grin. Then there's no escape. You may have fled the past, but to play the game, you must choose, and, suddenly, clarity struck like a jagged bolt of lightning. I turned inward, seeking that flickering hope that had once represented my innocence. If I refuse to play, then you'll remain here with me. I shouted, casting my voice over the spiraling darkness. I refuse to be bound by you, and just like that, something shifted. The room shuddered as I found my footing, my resolve solidifying into an almost tangible force. You are nothing but fragments of my past. Shadows that hold no power unless I give it to you. The malevolent laughter faltered, shadows recoiling as if physically struck. With one deep breath, I roared, pouring everything I could muster into that proclamation. I banish you. As my words echoed through the air, a blinding light exploded from within me, an incandescent flame of hope born from the ashes of forgotten joy. I felt its heat wash over me. The darkness writhed, recoiling as tendrils of brightness pushed back against the suffocating void. No. Alex shrieked, a banshee's wail of rage that penetrated through the noise, his form twisting into nothing as the shadows began to disintegrate around me, dissolving like morning mist. You foolish child! With one last thrust of that inner light, the shadows erupted, falling away like rain. The cavern dissolved into the brilliance until nothing remained of the horrors I had faced, nothing but the warmth of liberation. But even as I liberated myself from this torment, an unfurling sensation prickled at my spine, a wicked realization. The figures of my friends lingered in the edges of my vision, their faces twisting once more, yearning yet forlorn. You cannot forget. They wailed, their voices rattling the ether as I stood before the shimmers of daylight pouring through darkness that I took one step back and felt their desperation clawing through my heart, echoing in the cavern that had been formed within my soul. No, I couldn't abandon them again. Yet even as my mind whirled, I hesitated, a rancid chill seeping into my bones. The laughter echoed still, woven into the very fabric of reality. Not everything is solved, it echoed darkly. Evil still lingers, and as I stepped forward into the light, I realized that remnants of darkness would forever remain, the shadows of my past ingrained, like a tattoo on my soul. With every beat of despair, an awareness dawned on me: some games are never truly over, they simply lay in wait, hiding behind the whispers of innocence lost. The daylight glimmered brightly, but as I left those shadowy depths behind, a single shriek of laughter echoed back into the abyss, taunting the remnants of my sanity. Are you ready to play again? And from that moment on, I understood. The darkness was always just a heartbeat away, lurking behind closed doors, waiting for the chance to pull me back into its inescapable games.